In America, the most powerful man was watching us, watching every word we spoke as if his voice alone could decide what happened next. It wasn't just surveillance. It felt like a warning, a shadow stretching across the room, telling everyone to expect something that would shake them to their core. People whispered that this moment would become a piece of history, a witness to the day he finally faced the consequences of a lifetime of choices he believed would stay buried forever. He used to clean his image the way someone wipes fingerprints off a glass object, carefully, deliberately, pretending everything was spotless. But the phone, that one phone, had something else. Evidence. A camera that had recorded him in moments he never imagined would see daylight. The voice that came through those recordings was unstable, trembling, as if even the microphone could feel the weight of what it captured. Private moments, private confessions, silent sentences stitched together into a timeline he could no longer escape. The recordings played back like ghosts rising from the past, arms crossed, waiting for their chance to speak. "Call me when you're ready," the voice said in one clip. But now he wasn't ready. He never had been. One day he said, "You want to play my game?" But the game was no longer in his hands. This setup, which once felt so simple, had turned into a trap he couldn't break free from. Sources whispered that the interview he agreed to, the one he thought would be gentle, predictable, had been cold, sharp, and prepared to cut straight through every lie he carried. He walked in confident, jacket straightened, face rehearsed. The population outside kept guessing what he would say, but inside, in that room, the tension was thick enough to choke on. The prosecutor sitting across from him wasn't there to smile or soften the blow. Jackson, the interviewer, was known for turning soft questions into iron hooks, and today his microphone felt like a weapon. The moment the interview started, the background felt like it had collapsed into a single point. Him. He wasn't interested in talking. He wasn't winning. He wasn't controlling anything anymore. Every 10 seconds he looked like he was aging a year, slipping from authority into desperation. Especially when the female staff member walked in with the folder, the one everyone feared. Her steps echoed, her hands shook, but she carried the truth. It was the kind of truth that ruins careers, breaks illusions, and forces powerful men to confront the space they once owned so confidently. She placed the evidence on the table, quietly, as if even sound would be disrespectful in this moment. He tried to laugh it off, a nervous, broken laugh, but laughter doesn't fix a collapsing empire. "Just play the next clip," Jackson said calmly. The room went silent, a silence that stretched like a rope tightening around his neck. The next version of the recording played. His voice, shaky, almost unrecognizable. A voice that had once manipulated financial rooms, moved markets, controlled boardrooms. Now that same voice betrayed him, exposing everything he had tried to bury. For the first time, he looked small, not powerful, just a man caught between truth and downfall. He stood as if he wanted to run, but his legs didn't move. His hands froze on the table. Everyone watched. From Twitter storms to whispered secrets, from boardroom games to denied accusations. Everything he thought he had escaped came crashing down in front of him. The evidence, the screenshots, the accounts, the messages, the phone calls, the recordings, all carefully arranged in the folder like the final nails in the coffin of his influence. He sank into his chair. Not the chair of a leader, not the chair of a man in control, but the chair of someone who finally understood that the world he built had begun to crumble long before this moment. Jackson leaned forward, voice steady, expression unreadable. "Do you still want to continue?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The room reacted with a mix of disgust and fascination. People leaned closer, eyes wide, as if trying to catch every detail of the fall of a man who once stood at the top of the world. The weight of the silence that followed was heavier than the recordings themselves. It stretched, lingered, and wrapped around him like a dark fog. His influence, the one he believed could never be removed, suddenly felt paper-thin. The folder contained everything: accounts, dates, hidden transfers, sealed agreements, private confessions, audio fragments, and written notes that mapped his entire rise and collapse. Even his own handwriting betrayed him. He tried to explain. Words stumbled out, half sentences, broken thoughts, excuses tangled with fear. But the more he spoke, the worse it became. Every explanation sounded like an admission. Every pause sounded like guilt. The truth wasn't just revealed. It was undeniable. He looked down at his hands. The same hands that once commanded rooms, wrote orders, signed deals, shook presidents' palms, held power like a weapon. Now they trembled. They weren't steady enough even to close the folder. The camera kept rolling. The staff member stood frozen. Jackson waited. Everyone watched. And he, the man who once feared nothing, now feared the sound of his own voice. The interview continued, spiraling deeper. He tried to reclaim control, but every attempt exposed another crack. His voice wavered, his confidence dissolved, his expressions faltered, and eventually he simply fell silent. The silence spoke louder than the clips. The world outside didn't yet know what had happened in that room. But it would. And when it did, it would mark the end of everything he had built. One final moment, one final clip, one final truth that couldn't be denied. His empire wasn't taken from him. He handed it away, piece by piece. Every time he underestimated the power of what was recorded, what was remembered, what was waiting patiently to rise again. He leaned back, eyes distant, knowing the story was no longer his to control. This was the downfall he never expected. This was the truth he couldn't escape. And this, finally, was the price of a lifetime of choices he believed would never catch up to him.